Hello viewers, and welcome to another episode of Inside the Real Estate in your darling station, Housing TV Africa, broadcasting directly from the capital city of Nigeria, Abuja. Today's topic is on low-cost rent, unraveling the role of agency and legal fees. I am your host, Raymond Ken Mbata. To give you a bit of background on our discussions today, let's have this little introduction. Prospective tenants in Abuja often face challenges with extra fees after rent, including agency fees, and this is typically 10 to 20% of annual rent, paid upfront during the lease and signing. Legal fees. This is also a varying cost. It depends on the property value and is also negotiable. Withholding tax, usually 10% of the rent, and actually having potential addition as the case may be. Security deposits, which is often equivalent to 1 to 2 months of the rent. Service charges, 12 to 13% of monthly rent, maybe even maintenance costs attached to it. And these extra fees can significantly increase the total cost of renting a property in Abuja, making it essentially more expensive for tenants to factor into their budget, which most of the times takes up 70% of their annual earnings. We'll go for a short break, and when we return, I will introduce our guest, who is going to demystify the issues surrounding low-cost rent in Abuja, and not just Abuja, in whole of Nigeria, which is our catchment zone for today. Stay tuned and keep it locked on Housing TV Africa. We'll be right back.
From the capital city of Nigeria, Housing TV Africa has carved a niche for branding the name as the pioneer TV station, showcasing the beauty of architecture and design, thereby promoting the housing sector. With the state-of-the-art facilities to having professional and credible staff, together creating the component of digital broadcasting. Housing TV Africa, your housing dreams come true.
Good to have you back on the real estate on Housing TV Africa. I still remain your host, Raymond Ken Mbata, and our guest today is a real estate lawyer and the lead partner of Lehi Attorneys, Babayemi Olaniyan. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure having you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Without taking any more time, let's delve into the crux of the matter. Sir, please take us through the rationale behind extra fees after payment of rent. Is it not possible that a man can pay rent to the landlord and just pack in? Why those other extra fees? Are they also parts and parcel of the property that is about to be occupied by law? Or there are some other things that we don't know? After all, you're the attorney here. Please demystify for us.
Okay, thanks very much for having me. So there's nothing wrong in you getting the property directly from the landlord. But then the question is, do you know the landlord, right? So you have people that are lucky enough to know the landlord, and landlord is able to deal with them directly. That's one part. Secondly is the fact that some landlords don't want that stress of dealing with multiple people. Right, so you have one person, maybe the person is not fit for your house and all that. So all that screening process, most landlords try to phase it out or outsource it. Now, that outsourcing is where agents now come in. Number two is you're looking for a type of house, right? You don't know where it is. I mean, take for instance, Abuja is very big. I mean, you go to some places sometime, and you're like, is this still Abuja? And you're wondering. But those agents have walked the nooks and cranny of Abuja. They know where what is. So when the property comes out, they already have a group where those things are posted, and then people just go there and get it and put it out. So sometimes you need someone to show you where what you are looking for is, and that is where those agents come in. Now, so yes, you can meet the landlord, fine and good, but also those agents play the role of serving as a link. It's just like when you want to buy something online or you go to some websites. Those websites or those e-commerce platforms, they serve as a link between you, the buyer, and the seller. So you might not even necessarily meet the seller, but they just have that link where you can order in, and it is delivered. It is picked up from the seller and delivered to you, the buyer. It's the same system that you have those an If you are able to meet the landlord directly on your own, you don't need to pay. You might not need to pay all those fees again. However, if the landlord has an institution or a person that is managing the property, you might still pay that agency fee. So all these are the various factors that form part of the extra charges that people pay for land properties.
Okay. I see that there's a recurring decimal of the almighty agent. Let's zero in on the agents.
Yeah.
Now, are agents, is there a registered body, or is there a registration process to be a qualified agent, or is it an all-commerce affair? And if it is a registered body for agents to participate in before they can be able to get rent, get agency fees attached to rent, why are unregistered agents allowed to also participate in the real estate market?
Okay, great. So there's the Nigerian Institute of Estate Surveyors and Valuers, right? They are meant to be the professional body, and there's a board. They are meant to be the professional body for managing real estate transactions and property transactions. Now, the Act unfortunately does not provide certain criteria, or does not restrict it. And again, you understand that in law, it's a contract. I can appoint anybody as my agent. So there's no official system of registration of agency yet in Nigeria that has full force. I mean, if the Nigerian Institute of Estate Surveyors and Valuers maybe put a little bit more pressure and advance their costs better, we might now have a proper system where they will say all agents should register. But who is going to go and enforce it? So a lot of times we have different laws, but my question is, who's going to enforce it? How do you know an agent that is? So we now be a situation of you only go to agents that are registered. What if the house that you want, the person that can get you that house is not the registered agent? So you want to wait till your registered agent finds the house. So until we have a proper system for agency, maybe a different body that states that all agents must. For example, in Lagos now, Lagos has a law. I think it's in 2022 that law came into being, where they want to regulate the whole agency system in Lagos, because it has become arbitrary. Sometimes you see agency fees as much as 20%, because by the time you add 20% to your rent, it's jumping. It becomes excessive. So another thing that might need to eventually happen, when we might get there, is for there to be certain benchmarks, right? So for example, for lawyers, and let me divert there a bit. For lawyers, there's a remuneration order for lawyers, and says that for property transactions, depending on the amount, but the minimum fee is 10%.
Okay.
Right. Okay. So if you are paying legal fees, the minimum fee will be 10%. But again, there are other considerations that will also be put into it. So we also have to have something similar for agency, because there's some transactions that you do, and maybe I'm the lawyer in the transaction, and agent is collecting 10% or 15%, and the agent is saying, and we'll pay lawyer 5%. And I'm like, why why is the agent even collecting more than a professional who is a lawyer? But yeah, that's where we are now.
And this issue concerning the agents,
Yeah.
is it state specific, or is it a general? Is it a Nigerian unorthodox law per se? I know that there is lacuna concerning the agency and their organizations and registration for agents per se, because of how the nature of the housing industry, where some locations might be known to unregistered agents. So is it what is good for Abuja is different for Mina, is also different for Nasarawa and for Lagos?
I don't think so. So, like I said, Lagos is the state that I'm aware of that now that has started implementing a proper law, a proper legislation with regards to agency matters, right? The other states are still catching up. So, but we will need to have a federal law, right? And every state will now need to domesticate that federal law that will state how agents are to charge, provide a system where agents are registered. Because sometimes we've had situations where we had to deal with situations where agents collect money and they're gone.
Yeah.
And or you pay money to an agent, the agent collects money from multiple people, and like 5-6 people are fighting over a property. All these can be checkmated if we have a proper directory of agents. So you just go to a website, type this agent's name, or the agent even has an ID card, or get the agent's ID card, registration number. Use it to verify if that agent is a verified agent. And that's why I said that the Nigerian Institute of Estate Surveyors and Valuers might need to push a little bit more harder for there to be proper legislation around registration of agents and enforcing it. Because it's one thing to register, the next is enforcement. Because how do you enforce where you see a non-registered agent? How do you clamp down on them? Because there are a lot of agents in Abuja, and sometimes I'm always of the opinion that these people are also just fending for their life, right? They're also trying to see a way to make ends meet, right? Are they pushing it a little bit more than they should? I agree. Because there's also a part, I don't know where we'll get there, inspection fee.
Yeah, exactly.
Inspection fee is another big scam that happens, because a lot of times you realize that these agents know that this property is terrible, or this property does not fit what you have asked them for, but they will still take you there just for the purpose of collecting agency fee. So imagine that. So now I see a lot of times that the agents say that the agency fee is 15%. It is 15,000 naira to take you to a place. So imagine that they take and they are very, very funny. They take it down that if I take you to 5 places, you pay me 15. By the time I pay 15,000, how much is left for me to now pay the rent? So all these are things that need to really be checkmated, because if not, we're going to make house, and that's why houses have become very expensive, right? We need to checkmate all those issues, because for someone to pay inspection fee every time that they are going to it becomes overwhelming for people.
Okay, let me still bring it back to the base of the legal luminaries, because they say every other person is educated, but the lawyer is a learned person. And being attached to this industry and having the agents, in fact, the agency fees are not far from the legal fees. In fact, if I may say, lawyers still look up to agents to bring jobs their way concerning rent. And if the agent is to collect his dues either way, and the lawyer is there present and part of the process of giving away rent, why can't the lawyer, or why can't the legal, why can't the Nigerian Bar Association enforce that any lawyer involved in property should also supersede over what occurs between the clients, between the prospective tenant and the agents as well?
So that will not be what the MBA can do, or what the MBA has always advocated is that that lawyers have their fee, right, which is 10%, right? It's not left for the Nigerian Institute of Estate Surveyors and Valuers, or the agents, or any other institution that is supposed to regulate them, to provide a proper structure, right? And that starts from that registration we're speaking about. A proper structure that states that this is what they are meant to do and this is how they will carry it out. You can't now put that burden on the lawyers, right? There has to be law, so we can now take it to the National Assembly. Let the National Assembly and the various state houses of assembly implement laws or pass laws that would serve as a basis, right, for agency rights and privileges. That will be a more sustainable system, a more sustainable process that will help the way and the process that agency is being carried out. But the lawyer will do his part, which is the documentation and all that, while the agency part is done. Remember that sometimes the agency also involves the management of the property also. So that is a separate thing from the legal aspect.
Okay, I get your point. The onus is on the Institute of Survey and Valuers.
Yes, and
to
the various houses of assembly and National Assembly to pass a law and say, okay, this is what an agent cannot collect. This is the limits that the agent should follow, right? That would help the system better. But and again, remember that this is all contracts, right? Nobody is forcing anyone to rent property, right? If you feel like the agency is too much, you can negotiate. It's an open market system, right? Parties are free to negotiate. It's not cast in stone. If you go to you meet an agent and the agent is saying, oh, this is amount, you can negotiate. And that's even if you go to the market. When they tell you the price, the only place you cannot price is the supermarket, right? But if you go to typical markets, you can always price whatever amount is given.
I get your point. But be that as it may, what are the privileges enjoyed by the prospective tenant after payments of all these dues and fees per se, from your own perspective?
Okay, so the privileges are that they are able to get, number one, they're able to get what they want. They get the property they are meant to get. Number two is that it is meant to reduce their runaround time. So imagine just driving around Abuja looking for a house and waiting to see to let to lease. Most people don't put to let to lease again because they've given the agent. An agent knows that if you see it on the property, you will just call the number and won't need them anymore. So what that agent does is, the benefit of having that agent is that the agent is able to take you to the property and see you through the process to ensure that you get the property. And that's why even if you see some property transactions have different agents, everybody is trying to bring in their clients. It now depends on which agent is faster, who is able to pay money first, and all that. So you have that certain level of security that, okay, I'm going through this proper agent, especially if it's now a proper estate valuer, estate surveyor and valuer. You are definitely sure that this person is the right person that I'm dealing with. So I would advise that when you're doing property transactions, especially property transactions that have substantial amount of money, always deal with a registered estate surveyor and valuer. Then also ensure that you have a lawyer in that transaction, because the lawyer will be able to advise you on the various legal aspects of it. The lawyer is not doing the agency work, he's doing the legal aspects, while the estate surveyor and valuer is doing the estate surveying parts. And that's why it's always very important that you use a registered estate surveyor and valuer. I know I'm repeating this, but it's very, very important, especially in transactions that involve a huge amount of money.
Okay, concerning legislation for streamlined legislations across the nation, in your knowledge, is there any that has come up in the National Assembly to ensure that these lacunas are being filled up?
So I'm not aware of any now. Like I mentioned earlier, the only one I know I'm aware of is in Lagos State. Lagos State is the only state I know of that has, I think, a Lagos State Rental Act or something that seeks to regulate that whole ecosystem. But again, we have the Nigerian Institute of Estate Surveyors and Valuers Registration Act. right? That act seeks to, it has a board, it seeks to ensure that anybody that is carrying out estate surveying and valuing is registered with them. That's why you see, I think you see ESV. Some people have ESV in their name. ES, estate surveyor and valuer, blah 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 blah. Right. So that is where we are. But I feel like the board needs to do more. That's the board of estate surveyors and valuers, needs to do more in ensuring that there's proper enforcement, there's proper registration, there's proper clampdown on people that are not registered or are not certified estate surveyors and valuers, right? And there needs to also be a proper system for agency. Who are agents? What are their rights and responsibilities? Where they fail, what should be done? All this needs to be done. So there's a need for us to review that Estate Surveyors and Valuers Act. It is an old act. It needs to be revamped.
Okay. Also touch on a little bit on the regulations for stipulated legal fees, and if all lawyers are allowed to also participate in the real estate market just for the sake that they have been called to bar, or is there a specific requirement for a lawyer to transit into the real estate market?
So there's no specific requirements. Once you have been called to the bar, you have the rights and privileges to advise and to prepare the agreement, right? You are not, the lawyer is not acting as an agent. The lawyer is to advise the party, right, in the property transaction, and to draft or review the agreement depending on which side is for. Now there's a legal practitioner's remuneration order, right, that has just been released. It stipulates the minimum amount lawyers are to charge for every fee, for every property transaction, from 5% to 10%. There are also certain transactions that are ad valorem. So it stipulates the amounts that, or the fees that lawyers are to charge for mortgages, sale transactions, rental, appearances. All that is stipulated in that legal practitioner's remuneration order, and so every lawyer is now enjoined to follow that order. It's like a directive from the Nigerian Bar Association saying that as a lawyer, if you are going to be involved in a property transaction, to advise and to draft the agreement or review the agreement, this is what you must charge.
Okay.
So it's now cast in stone.
Yes.
And I think, and for rental it's 10%. I think for property transaction, depending on the amount, is between 5 to 10%, or yes, they're about it.
Okay. You're still tuned on to Inside Real Estate on Housing TV Africa, right here in the nation's capital, Abuja. We'll take a short break, and when we come back, more to come from Babayemi Olaniyan, a real estate agent, a real estate lawyer, and also a lead partner of Lehi Antonis right here in Abuja. Stay tuned.
Let me start by appreciating the organizers of the Africa Housing Awards, the Housing Africa Group, and particularly my very good friend Festus Adebayo for putting up together this remarkable initiative.
Award of Leading Woman in Real Estate, presented to Hajia Risikatu Ahmed.
Welcome back to Inside Real Estate on Housing TV Africa, broadcasting live from Abuja, the nation's capital. We have been discussing on low-cost rent and demystifying all questions and difficulties faced by prospective tenants as concerns rent in the nation's capital. And I am here still with a real estate lawyer and lead partner of Lehi Antonis, Babayemi Olaniyan, It's a pleasure still.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, sir. All right, let's go into the securities that are there for a tenant who has paid legal fees and perhaps has some infractions from the agency part of it. If a prospective tenant finds himself in such a quagmire, what are your recommendations for him to seek redress?
You know that there are two sides of this agency part. Number one is the part of the agency that, or the agent that takes you to the property, right? And there's also the agent or the institution that is managing the property.
Okay.
Now, if you talk about the agent that is taking the property, if you clearly state it, right, that this is the property I want, and I always advise, get pictures, right? Get pictures that will show you what it is that you are getting, right? Get pictures of the property. Sometimes most agents don't want to send it because they feel like most tenants will circumvent them and go to the property, right? But tell the agent that if this property does not meet this threshold, then I am not paying you your agency. I'm not paying you your inspection fee. But you know that agency fee is paid when you are paying for the property. Inspection fee is paid when you are still scouting for the property. So we have to be clear on which. So at the point of inspection, you state that, okay, this, I'm paying you this money, right? But this money I'm paying you is when I see this, or you pay a certain amount and say this will cover on for the property you're going to show me, right? And the properties must meet this threshold. But all the time the problem is that a lot of Nigerians are in a hurry, they're already tired and frustrated, and that's why the agents tend to misuse their powers, and it becomes very, very traumatizing.
Okay. We are beset in a situation in Nigeria now that sometimes flooding can result to emergency evacuation of families, sometimes en masse. Sometimes it might be as a result of security concerns that arises to internally displaced persons, undocumented persons, documents being lost in the flood or in the situation as per se. Are there special occasions that cover this group of people, internally displaced persons that are seeking for rent, and that will allow them not to be taken advantage of while trying to get accommodation?
So I'm not aware of any law or any that would be, maybe if NEMA, that's Nigerian Emergency Management Agency, it's that would be within their purview to provide. I remember when there were a lot of issues in Benue and Plateau State, they had to create IDP camps, right, for internally displaced persons camps to be, for internally displaced people to be placed in those camps. But once you now goes to looking for rent or looking for a property, you cannot now mandate a landlord whose investment, because we also have to look at the fact that these properties are investments by these landlords. They did not go into the business for charity. They went into the business to make money, right? And if they went into the business to make money, you cannot now force them to say, okay, take this person is entirely displaced, and then the person stay in your house. It doesn't work, right? That's the responsibility of government, right? It's government that has that fiduciary responsibility to take care of its citizens, and that's where the various agencies that are responsible for that will come in.
Okay. Then also, without it takes two to tango. We've been talking about the tenant. Let me not leave out the landlord. What are the securities and safeties for the landlord in case of infractions on the part of the tenant and the part of also the agent that he enjoys? Because we are trying to cover all aspects of this rent, and of which the landlord also must be protected. Let me get your opinion on this.
Yeah, so that's why first of all, the landlord has to pick a reliable agent, pick a registered estate surveyor and valuer, right, that will manage the property for you, right? That is very, very important. Or if there are lawyers that are not inactive practice, those lawyers too can serve as agents, right? But a lawyer in active practice cannot serve as agent or managing property, right? They can only advise you on the transaction. Now, what most landlords now do is what they call caution deposits, right? So where a tenant is paying rent, they also put a certain amount that's called caution deposit, which is meant to be fully refundable if the tenant leaves the property and puts the property in the same condition he or she met it, did not destroy anything, right? Everything is in good condition and can be rented back at the same condition that's here. So that's what most landlords now do, having a caution deposit that states. There also another thing that most landlords do is that they have guarantors form, right? They'll give you a guarantors form that let your guarantor feel if you misbehave, we'll go after the guarantor and all that and all that. Another thing that most landlords do is get a letter of introduction from the person's place of work. And that's why most landlords would prefer people that are working with government, right? Civil servants, public servants, and people that work in various MDAs, right? Get a letter of introduction from them that says that you see our staff and you're receiving so and so salary or whatever, and then they're able to do. So these are the various safeguards that landlords can put in place.
Okay. Okay. Also, in the case of damage of property by natural circumstances, let's say by flood, or let's say by fire, is there a way? Is there a fund? Is there a relief for the landlord to be able to rebuild? Because if the landlord cannot, and he takes through intense pressure to build this, it's going to reflect in the rent. So is there a palliative per se for a prospective, for a landlord who faces such a situation on his property?
I'm not aware of any palliative, except if the landlord
Or
has
should there
insured,
be?
if he has insured his property, right? So that's where we advise landlords to always insure their properties and ensure that. So one thing is insuring, the next thing is paying your premium, right? So you don't just insure and say, okay, I've insured it, and you don't now pay your premium. Premiums are usually paid every year, depending on the insurance company you're using, right? So the landlord should insure his property against fire, flooding, wanton destruction, and all that, so that just in case something happens, it falls back to the insurance company. The insurance company will be able to cover the losses that that's
Okay. There has been reports from some tenants that some landlords have been caught in the use of substandard building materials and demand so much, and when this is paid and when the tenant gets to enjoy the rent space, the place keeps falling apart, and it's blamed on the tenant that is for the use of this space that has caused this. Meanwhile, it was still traced to the use of substandard building materials. Is there any relief, or what's your opinion on this?
So I think that it's bad practice by the landlord to build a substandard house, right? And to be honest, if a tenant gets into a property, right, and sees that the house is substandard, the tenant should report, right? I think the FCDA have a department, or development control has a department that does integrity tests on buildings, right? So you can report that this building has failed integrity test, and most tenancy agreements should carry a clause that the landlord should keep the property structurally and wind sound, right? That the property should be structurally sound. That is a key requirement from a landlord. And if he has breached it, it means that the landlord has breached a fundamental term in his contract, and the tenant can sue for that.
Okay.
Yeah, tenant can sue for that. Yeah.
Okay, concerning the living spaces, let's go into the living spaces.
Yeah.
Some of those living spaces, you barely have moving room outside the door, other than just getting outside the gate. The kids can't play outside. Some of the tenants even have to do their washing in front of the door. There is barely any moving space, just because of maximization of space for the profits of the landlord. What's your opinion on this?
Okay, so my opinion on this is at the risk of sounding very funny, you cut your coat according to your size, right? the question, the primary question is, did the landlord get building approval from development control? Is that building an approved building type for that area? If yes, then you have the choice of staying or not staying. The only part you have an issue is if the property is not, or that building does not have a building approval for that type of building, for that type of congested type of building space. But if it has a congested type of building space, then if you're not comfortable with it, you would look for the one that has more space. Just that more space, more money.
Exactly. Okay. Africa Industrialization Day is just around the corner, and we are trying to celebrate. I'm careful in my choice of words. We are trying to celebrate the industrialization of Africa. Now, let me zero it back to real estate and mass low-cost housing, because it's important that such a burgeoning city like Abuja also makes provision for its populace that is coming up. And being the center of unity, everyone is allowed by law to reside and do business in Abuja. Has Africa, let's start from Africa, has Africa reached its industrialization stage, or has it reached that point where we can use our own homegrown products to be able to make possible low-cost housing for the populace to be able to enjoy as part of celebrating Africa Industrialization Day?
I think that we're going there. We're getting there. We are moving slowly and surely. Eventually, we will reach the promised land, right? There are a couple of companies that yes can provide mass housing, but again, we have to understand mass housing would typically work where government wants it to work, because government has to first of all give the land, right, and give a large expanse of land, and say that it's mass housing, right, and then regulate the price at which the mass housing is going to be sold at. But that's where the problem is. It starts as mass housing and then turns to, because there's some places that you see in Abuja currently that are attacked mass housing estates, but the price that they are selling those properties cannot be mass housing prices.
Exactly.
So it starts as mass housing, people get it cheap, and over time it changes hands from one person to another person. This person has small 10 million, this person has small 5 million, another person has another 2 million. Before you know it, the mass housing has become selected housing.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it might start at mass housing, but it eventually will down. And as a city gets bigger, right, and development gets to that area, houses will definitely go up. So no matter how we try to want to find a way around it, once development gets to an area, things will pick up in that area. It becomes more expensive. By the time you put a factory there, or put an agency of government, or put one building or one industry, that area gets more value. Land appreciates with time. So even if it's a mass housing project now, it does not mean to be a mass housing project 10 or 5 years down the line, right?
Exactly.
So the government might just have to just keep on opening up more areas, and I think that's what His Excellency, the Minister of the Federal of FCT, is doing. Is opening up areas, different areas. Kuje, if you go to Kuje, there's a lot of development in Kuje, there's a lot of development in Gwagwalada, outside Abuja, just to ensure that there's indeed mass housing for Nigerians.
Okay. Why has various attempts by the government? I know right now there is the Renewed Hope housing agenda, but prior to now, we are still looking forward to see the success rate of the Renewed Hope housing agenda. We can't make judgments of that now, but subsequent to this time, there has been attempts by government to provide mass housing for its populace, and has failed woefully. Could you pinpoint the reasons that led to the abysmal failure of these
Mass housing projects.
Housing projects?
I think a lot of times, at the risk of trying to blame governments, a lot of times, I think sometimes the problem are the contractors. Because you give a contractor a job to build a house and he does a substandard job or does it halfway and disappears, right? So, and by the time he disappears, they're looking for him. They need to now get a new contractor. By the time they are getting a new contractor, the contractor is saying that the dollar has gone up. They will need to create more money. Before that is done, the minister is changed, or government is changed. The new government says that is not our focus now. We'll pen this one, we'll go to another area, and the cycle just keeps repeating. So I think if everybody plays their part, government picks a particular area, gets a reliable contractor, right? Monitors the project, ensure its completion, and ensure that all the variables are taken into cognizance, right? Payment is paid as at when due, right? Even if there are variations, the variations are reasonable. The contractor is not asking for a variation of over 50% or 100% variation of the contract, right? And so once all that is done, contractor does a good job, hands over back to government. Government doesn't just give its people, government gives everybody, right, access to the mass housing scheme, and then gradually we'll get there.
Okay. Perhaps I might not have laid a finger on it, or I might have skipped. You are a major player in the real estate and the low-cost rent industry. Are there challenges that we have not delved into now? Because I also want to have you into the catchment zone. I want you to be in business. I still want you to prosper and make good profit so that other lawyers could also take a cue from you. Are there challenges in your line of business that has not been captured so far as we've been discussing that you might need to elaborate for us?
I think the major challenge that comes to mind now is where people are not ready to pay lawyers their full due. People say that lawyer, just changing agreements and moving it from one to another, and sometimes it's not like that, because every and I tell my people in the office that every transaction has different peculiarities. Because there are different personalities, they might also have different obligations and different perspectives. So in every contract, you are looking at who are the parties. Does party A have a tendency to want to misbehave? Right? If it has a tendency to want to misbehave, I have to put certain safeguards, right, in that contract that would protect the client and all. So I think it's just around fees that there's usually an issue with that. Sorry, with most lawyers. By the time fees are sorted out, parties are able to get into their agreement proper. And that thing is that most guarantors do not want to fulfill their guaranteed, or they don't want to fulfill their own part of the bargain. Because if you guarantee somebody, you are saying that if the person does not pay, the person destroys your property, hold me liable. And that's why you don't just guarantee anybody. Whoever you're guaranteeing is someone that you know that, okay, yes, I can stand for this person and I have the resources to stand for this person. So don't just say, I want to guarantee because I know the person. No, you have to be sure that this person is someone that you can actually guarantee. So these are the two areas that we have issues with mutually.
Okay, rounding up, finally, what are your projections? What are your predictions? What are your postulations concerning the real estate market in Nigeria? Let's say in the next 20 years, let's make a projection. Let's say this is where we ought to be, and this is what our plans are in the real estate and also in the housing industry.
So I expect that we're going to have, already if you notice, we're having less bungalows.
Yes.
So I expect that now we're going to get more high-rise buildings, 3-4 story buildings, right? That are going to be developed in Nigeria. We're going to have less space because every developer is looking for how to maximize profits. So there needs to be, I feel like there needs to be a lot of discussion around it. So I was out of the country for a bit, and I went to an estate and they had green areas. You had areas for children to play, right? You still even had ample parking space. Most houses now, they will just give you one parking or 1.5 parking space. There's not even place for you to take your children to. Because I mean, with the growing rate of insecurity, you want to be able to keep your children in eyesight,
Exactly.
right? And it's better if if I'm staying in an estate, I want to be able to, at least there's security in the estate. It's properly secure. There's also defense. I want to be able to say, okay, my child can go to the play area and play. I also want to be able to come out of my house and go to the gazebo and relax and take small fresh air, right? And all that. So all those are things that are lacking, and I feel like it's going to get worse because there's a lot of greed among developers. But again, we're going to see a lot of high-rise buildings, a lot of fancy buildings that have elevators and the rest, right? There are a lot of developers that are already doing amazing work in the housing space already. So we're going to have a lot of fancy houses that are going to get very expensive. And whether the government will be able to provide mass or affordable mass housing,
Good.
is where there might be a problem, right? So the government will have to be very intentional about it for us to have proper affordable mass housing.
Would you mind advising?
Yeah, so I would advise the government that houses are going to get very expensive. The typical civil servant might not be able to afford those houses. But having served Nigeria, I think it's going to be proper for that civil servant to be able to pay off, to be able to get housing and pay it off within and live in it within their lifetime, not after they have died. So government needs to, especially to provide that system for, and in good areas. It shouldn't just be that I'm a civil servant, I've worked for 35 years, and then the only place I can have a house because I've not stolen money is in far away, Gwagwalada or Kwali or outside the outskirts or outside town. Right? Civil servants and public servants should be able to have good housing within town, right? That also improves their quality of life. That will also make civil service and public service interesting for people because they know that even when they retire or they have certain great benefits that are attached to their service. So government should invest a lot in mass housing, get the good developers to develop the properties and make it available for the common Nigerians who really need government.
Oh, be that as it may, we've been enjoying these discussions. We've been picking the brains of an expert in the real estate and low-cost housing industry. But time is of the essence. We will call it a day today, and that's the much we can take on Inside the Real Estate, even on Housing TV Africa, your darling station, broadcasting here from Abuja, the nation's capital. Want to thank our guest, who is a real estate lawyer, a lead partner, Lehi Antonis, in the person of Baba Yemi Olaniyan. I believe that when I want to get my house rent, he's going to slash it by 5%. And I want to say thank you for making it a day with us.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure.
Yes.
We've been picking his brains and we've gotten a lot of input from his opinions. Want to advise that you keep a date with us until we come your way, same time, on the same station. View us on StarTimes channel 149 and follow us on all social media handles, Housing TV Africa. Like, share, and subscribe. Also, download our app, Housing TV Africa, on Google Play Store and on Apple Store. I remain your host, Raymond Ken Mbata. Until we come your way, same time, stay tuned and God bless you.